Hi, welcome to the Mentorship Challenge. I'm Marc Wainer, and I'm passionate about mentorship. If you haven't seen all of our episodes, you're welcome to catch up on our YouTube channel. We've interviewed people from across a whole range of spectrum, businessmen, professionals, sportsmen, and with me in the studio today is Anthony Orelowitz. You may not know the name, you may not know the name of the company, the Paragon Group, but you certainly will know some of the iconic buildings that Anthony, one of the most preeminent architects in South Africa, has designed. Anthony, welcome. First of all, why did you do architecture? What made you go?
So I've always had a passion for doing architecture. And when I was about 7 or 8, my parents built a house. And they were friendly with the architect, a guy called Marc Wainer. And I watched the house go up, and I always found it fascinating.
Okay, but then what was incredibly unusual for me as an architect is you then went on to do an MBA.
Yes.
Which I think is very unusual. And even more unusual, you then went to work for a bank in their property finance division.
So my last year of architecture, I went to a club one night, came back with I thought it was a hangover. I had this huge headache. But when I opened my eyes, I couldn't see centrally. It was just this dark dot in front of my eyes. And I went blind for about 3 months during my final year of architecture. And slowly my vision came back functionally enough for me to work. So I did an MBA for 3 years, and then I went to work for Stuart Shaw Taylor at Standard Bank. And 5 years to the day, I resigned from Standard Bank and went back to architecture.
And now you're setting up your own practice. I think that was 1997, was it?
Yeah.
1997. And you get a call that there's a potential client.
The day I left, I got a call saying that there were these 2 clients that wanted to meet an architect. They're from overseas. And would I be interested? And in those days, I rented a house on the top of Linksfield Ridge, which had a huge lounge in it. And I was lucky that my father owned a second-hand furniture company. So I phoned him up, and I said to him, have you got any spare furniture? He said, yes. So I did a quick plan, and his trucks arrived the next morning, and they set up a false office, and they didn't have any people. So I phoned my friend Gary Lowe, and I said, Gary, how many people have you got? He said, I've got 5. I said, great, I've got 4 offices and 1 boardroom. Do you want to be here tomorrow afternoon? These guys came in, me and Gary met them. They liked us, and they gave us 2 houses. And Gary's guys went back to their offices.
So you were a con artist.
Well, it's...
But that was really thinking on your feet.
Yeah, you have to make a plan.
Absolutely.
You have to be inventive if you want to run a business.
And what about technology? I mean, probably when you qualified, everything was drawn by hand.
Yeah, in fact, when I qualified, we used to draw in 2D, but the hard drives weren't big enough for full drawing. So you used to take floppy disks and load half the drawing in, and when it was full, you used to take it out and load the next one. And now we're 3D printing a lot of our buildings, a lot of the pieces of our buildings. We probably were one of the first to use to draw in 3D and to use BIM. We've written our own snagging software, which we use in our buildings, because we're designing that stuff to suit the way that we work in South Africa in our environment. And we're now using VR and AR.
You're also very much at the cutting edge of technology in terms of building materials, new kinds of glass, lightweight tiles. Where do you find all this, and do you find it easy to implement?
Yeah, look, it's a serious thing, because when you take on a new material, you carry the liability for its performance. So you've got to check that the material has been used overseas and that it has a track record. You need to see, you need to get buy-in from the contractors and from the subcontractors to say that they...
And from the client.
And from the client to say that they're comfortable with the materials. But we've got, in the old days, if you take your building, for example, you've got those round columns. And those are milled out of a solid piece of stone. And today we take a concrete column and we take stone that is so thin, it's only 2 or 3 millimeters, and we glue it on. And the savings from just in terms of that process is hundreds and hundreds of thousands of rands.
What do you see as your legacy?
It's interesting, because I just wanted to build big buildings when I was younger. And now I suppose I'm more interested in leaving a sustained practice that'll be around for many, many years, that we can educate and look after people in this industry for years to come.
So along your career path, have you had mentors?
Yeah, I've had great mentors. I think Stuart Shaw-Taylor was a great mentor. Yeah, Mike Chalice, the guy who designed my parents' original house, he was fantastic. You know, I was a kid of 7 or 8, and from the age of 12 or 13, I used to go to the offices during the holidays, and they used to give me access to the computers, and he was fantastic.
But even if it's not face-to-face, I'm sure you got inspiration from other architects, from books, from buildings they've designed.
You know, in the old days, it used to be very particular architects. It was like Le Corbusier, Mies van der Rohe, Oscar Niemeyer. Those, for me, formed a base around which I've developed a sense of architecture. And today you've got Herzog de Meuron, you've got Big, you have, and there are fantastic architects out there that you can look to.
But you have another arm to your practice.
Yeah.
So you've got Paragon Interface, which does the interiors.
Correct.
You're in the fortunate position, you either do the building and the interiors, or sometimes if you don't get the commission to do the buildings, you're fortunate enough to do the interiors. So you get 2 bites
of the apple.
Of the apple or the cherry.
Yeah, I mean, we just finished Discovery Interiors.
Which I haven't seen, but I believe are magnificent.
So that is a real privilege. I mean, that's 120,000 squares. It's a lot of building.
And talk about 120,000 squares on what is a reasonably low-rise building.
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably a kilometre to walk from one end to the other.
It's
you
far.
Don't need a gym.
Yeah, I think that the policy or the idea within Discovery was, earn your vitality points, and that's a reality. We designed, or the architects designed the building so that there would be movement, that people are forced to get up from their chairs, walk through the building, communicate and commune collectively.
This is so important, I think, in all buildings today, where you're trying to get areas for your staff, not to sit in little modules, but to actually integrate, talk to each other, interface. So, Anthony, so far it's been great talking to you and connecting. But the reason you're here, aside from this lovely chat, is to say to you how many of your hours, okay, and I know you have to spend time with your family as well, so we'll give you a few hours to do that, but how many of your hours can you give us to mentor some of the people out there who would like to be in the architectural profession?
I think 40 hours.
40 hours would be great, and I appreciate it. Thank you very, very much for that. Now, second part of it is, do you know somebody, whether they're in architecture or any other field, who you think would make a good mentor?
Yeah, I think that you should maybe speak to Stuart Gibbs from Zempro. I think that he'd be a good mentor around people who want to understand development, but not just the number side, but the actual what it takes to actually get things built.
We'll ask our production team to get his details, to contact him.
Okay.
We'll tell him he's been challenged by you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks.
If you would like to be mentored by Anthony, please register on the website. And remember, you can go to our YouTube channel to catch up on all of our previous interviews, and then register on our website. It could change your life. We'll see you after the break. With me in the studio is Anthea Ambursley. Anthea, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, very interesting career, a very interesting person. You started your career really with an emphasis on the health sector, doing stuff, AIDS, all the rest of it. Then you moved, whilst you were still doing that, into the hospitality sector. Started with a franchise with Just Letting, 2 years or so, and then moved into operating a guest house, a luxury guest house in Centurion, which I understand you're just moving out of.
Yes, that's correct. I've started a family and my son is very young, and at the age of 5 I realized that, when you have built a brand and you are the brand for your lodge, people always want to see you personally. And now I really have to weigh, my life in terms of where will the priority be. And so it's time for me to move on. But it was really great, the hospitality industry, it's a very, very great industry. If you focus on customer service, your clients will come back to you, and that was my motto.
Last year you started African Child, Your Time Is Now.
That's correct.
So you have a passion for children, for women in business, and of course, also very well known as an international speaker. So maybe tell us a little bit about why African Child.
Well, my son is 5 years old, and I think really for me as a mother, all I want to do is I want my son to be very confident, and I really want him to have a global vision. So by starting off with African, I always say to my son, we don't use the word can't in my house. So you can do everything. So if you cannot do it, you go and find out how to do it. So that is basically, the positivity I try to groom him with. And so as an African, I realized that, it takes a village to bring up a child. And so while I'm doing it with my son, I would like to do it, for every child in South Africa and on the continent.
So if you actually start off with the child, and a child of 2 or 3 can play with these friends, they have leaders, they have all these kind of things. We send them into the school system and they want them to conform.
You are correct, because, in schooling today, my concern is what can a school teach a child in this fast-paced life where technology is really going to take over. And my son was a year in a school in the UK, and I could see how diverse, schooling has become, and how important it is for your child to be socially involved. And, a child must really be confident to go out there and survive in the external environments.
So your background, where did you grow up? What kind of a background did you have?
I grew up on a farm in the Southern Cape, so I'm a farm girl, and I come from an entrepreneurial family because my father and mother was farmers. So when I finished school, I already knew that I'm not going to study, for degrees. So I opted for the best option to go and study business management at a technical college. So that was the best practical environment I could gain at a very young age.
You're also very much in demand as an international speaker. I see
Yes.
You've done talks in over 50 countries. How did that come about?
I always wanted to speak, and I am a storyteller. I like telling stories. I like teaching people. My mother usually said to me, when I was 7, I read the Bible to the people in my community, and then the children ran away because that was me. So I always said, that I would like to inspire other people, and I came from humble beginnings. And the only thing I could do was to inspire others and give them hope and tell them, that if I can do it, anybody can do it.
Okay. So then you write the book,
Yes.
Nothing is Impossible.
Yes.
Just tell us a little bit about that.
I decided at the time I was mentoring and coaching that there's so many people that wants to start a business and they don't know how. And I came across a lot of people that thought that you need money to start a business. And at the time I was thinking that, I can just tell them my story, because I started off with my own capital, with the little that I had, and I proved to corporates that I was able to deliver. And so my journey started. And so instead of me telling everybody the same thing, I thought to myself, why not just write a book so that even a 9-year-old can read it and understand what entrepreneurship is all about?
What advice would you give them?
We as women, really, we are multi-talented. And so for every woman, it's just for them to look on the inner side and listen to their inner voice and start to realize what is their passion in life, what makes them happy, and what can add value to their lives. In terms of looking at, the cost and how much it will be, just cut on your lifestyle, make compromises, and then you follow your dreams, because that is what I have done.
And take the risk.
If it means to sell your car and downgrade, just do that. But sometimes people don't want to compromise. And as a mother, family is important. And if a mother really wants to do it, she will find a way to do it.
You also talk about going global.
Yes.
So what do you want to do globally?
For the 2 years that I was in Europe, it was fascinating. I was volunteering at the school where my son was. And the stories that they taught in schools about Africa was very fascinating. And I listened to some of that and I'm like, is this my Africa that they are talking about? And I personally think that is why the reason why I want to go global, because I would like to go and retell our stories. You know, our stories hasn't been, you know, told the way it should be. And I just want to go back and retell those stories, because this is the stories I'm going to teach my child in his young life now.
People don't really have that much interest. If you say I'm from South Africa, they'll know about Nelson Mandela or something, and that's the beginning and end of it. Oh, and you've got gold in the streets or something like that. But really, very, particularly in America.
It is. That is a very huge market. And if you really look at tourism statistics, that Americans, you know, love South Africa. They love traveling to South Africa because surely, you know, for them, they would love to find out about their African descent too, and where, you know, the African continent fit into their lives and their history. So America is really, you know, a country that you can really go and educate about the African continent.
It needs a lot of education. I go to America, say, where are you from? South Africa. Oh, I know somebody in Kenya. Do you know them? You know, kind of, to them, it's one little place.
For me, that is the opportunity to really go and educate people, because the more people know about your country, the more interest they will have. And that can, you know, be a contribution to our GDP in tourism to our country too.
Throughout your career, have you had mentors, people who have helped you along the way?
Oh, from day one, yes. I'm a risk taker. I get very, very enthusiastic. And sometimes if I don't have somebody to keep me in my lane, I will be all over the show, yes. From a very early age, I realized that in order for me to be able to succeed, I will need some guidance and some wisdom and knowledge for people that are more experienced than me. And yes, I surrounded myself with mentors all the time. And if I move to different industries, I go and find a mentor who is in that specific industry. Because personally, for me, I always believe that there has been someone who has been on this journey and who has had failures and challenges, maybe where I can learn from, and I don't need to go through it. I can just learn from it. And that was always my concern. My father always said, you know, if you're a donkey, you just hit your head once, but not twice. So I was always thinking of myself as this donkey in entrepreneurship who doesn't want to hit her head so many times, but rather go and learn from someone that has been there.
And mistakes? Have you made mistakes that you've learned from?
So many to mention, but it is part of the journey, and I look forward to my mistakes every day, because if I don't make mistakes, then it means I'm not learning. And my motto in life is how quick I can bounce back from a mistake and move on. That is basically, you know, where your success comes from. So yes, mistakes is fun nowadays.
So if you had to give advice to somebody out there who would like to be like you, what would you tell them not to do? It's easy to tell them what to do. What shouldn't they do?
Don't be emotional. Think twice. And be careful how you risk money that doesn't belong to you. I have so many students that I'm coaching, and sometimes they're in such debt that they don't know how to get out of it. All I'm saying is play safe somehow, but just make sure that when you fall, you will be able to get up. And that is the biggest challenge, that, you know, sometimes people, you know, hit rock bottom and they just don't know how to bounce back, and just look at it as a lesson and move on.
I may have said this before, and I'm sure I can't remember, but I once was watching boxing. I'm an avid boxing fan, and I was sitting next to a guy who was then the world cruiserweight champion.
Wow.
And he said, who have you come to watch? And I told him, and he said, what's his record? And I told him, and he said, he's no champion. I said, how can you say that? He said, because he hasn't been down. If you want to be a champion, you have to be knocked down and be able to get up and carry on. And I think that applies to business and to life.
It is true.
You've got to be careful, but if you play it safe all the time and don't take risk, you're not going to achieve anything. What about your family? So we know you're married, you've got one child. What do you do for relaxation, for hobbies, for relaxation? What do you do for fun?
I'm a country girl. I like going out in the country, do hiking, cycling. My son loves animals, so we are in game parks most weekends where we will just go and take pictures, and I will give him a free ride holding the steering wheel. So outdoors for me is important because I love the sun and I like being outside. And I'm a reader, so I love reading, you know. So in my spare time or when everybody's asleep, that is what I do, because I'm always hungry for knowledge and I'm always hungry to learn. And so I make time, you know, for the things that really refresh me and energize me.
So if I had to ask you, for the benefit of our audience, is there a book that you think everybody should read, or a book that you've read that you would highly recommend to our viewers?
Oh, there's so many. But, you know, Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Very Successful People, for me, it is always a reference, you know. The 80-20 rule is also very important. So there's so many books, but, you know, it all depends, you know, what you need and where you are at that moment. So I can just refer back to my collections of books, you know, and I'm also an avid reader of John C. Maxwell, you know, leadership and, you know, how you can just improve your personal development.
And I think what a lot of people don't realize is that reading books and books from people is a form of mentorship in itself.
It's true. It's true.
You learn a lot.
Learning is life and knowledge is wisdom. So really
that's a lovely quote. Sorry, say it again.
Learning is life and knowledge is wisdom. Because what you learn in books, nobody can take away from you, but it is what you are doing with that knowledge. You can apply it or you can ignore it. But for me, I always learn from it, you know.
Anthea, it's been a fantastic chat. I really love talking to you. You just bubble enthusiasm, and I'm sure whatever you do, we're just going to hear more and more about you. What I didn't mention I'd like to is that you are the winner of a host of awards. Too many. If I would have started off with all the awards that you've won, you would have taken the whole program. But there are 2 in particular which I think are worthy of mention. So you were the finalist in Businesswoman of the Year, and you were also a semi-finalist in Africa's Most Influential Woman in Business and Government. So big congratulations.
Thank you.
And I'm sure you will be achieving a lot more. It's been an absolute pleasure. But before I let you go, the reason you're here, I'm sure you know, is that we want to know from you how many of your hours, because you're not traveling so much anymore, how many of your hours are you going to give us to mentor some of the many people out there who I think are going to apply to be mentored by you?
I will pledge 30 hours, and if need be, and they would love more of my time, I will be able to pledge more. Okay,
so if I say to you 3 hours a month for 12 months, 36 hours, can I get you from 30 to 36?
Oh yes, I can do that.
Okay, so 36 hours from you, that's the first part of the challenge. Yes. The second part is, do you know somebody either in field similar to what you're doing or completely unrelated who you think would make a good mentor?
Oh, I know a fantastic person, Barbara Stradom, and she's from BDSL, and she's a performance peak advocate, and she is really passionate about what she's doing. So performance in whatever you do is important, and I think Barbara will be a valuable add to the mentorship challenge.
That's fantastic. We will contact her. We'll tell her that she's been challenged by you.
Yes.
And we're going to get 36 hours or more from her.
You need to get more out of her.
Yes, no, she's got to beat you. There's no question. So once again, thank you so much for joining us. I'm sure that the viewers have enjoyed it. I certainly have. As a token of my appreciation, I'd like to give you a copy of my book, Making My Mark, Lessons from a Life in Property. Thank you.
Thank you for adding this to my library.
If you would like to be mentored by Anthea, please register on our website. And remember, you can go to our YouTube channel to catch up on all our previous interviews and then register on our website. It could change your life. We'll see you next week.